Hello and good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to get started. Today's webinar is Let's Talk About Literacy, Emergent Reading and Writing in the VPK Classroom. So thank you for joining us. So to get started, my name is Debra Cruz. I've worked as a preschool teacher, a toddler teacher, and an education director while in New York. So I have quite a bit of years of experience in the classroom and outside of the classroom. My favorite age group, though, is preschool. I have a background in special education, and I've been working in South Florida in the coaching field for about 3 years now. Just a fun fact about myself is that I'm an avid traveler, and I've been to about 23 countries so far, so just waiting for it to be safe again to travel.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Templin, and I have been in the field of early childhood education for slightly over 20 years, and I've spent the past 5 years supporting Broward providers. Some of my past roles include working as a 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old teacher. I've been a center manager, a curriculum coordinator, as well as a NACE administrator while up in New York. And a fun fact about myself is I have another full-time job. I am a mom of a very precocious and busy 2-year-old daughter.
Okay, so before we get started, we're just going to go over some housekeeping rules. As you have entered the presentation, you'll be able to see this white arrow, and that will help you to expand your window pane. You'll also see that symbol there, and that is how you can raise your hand throughout the presentation. We have our question box if you would like to comment or write anything as we're doing the presentation, you can do so there. We do also ask that you keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. We just want to avoid any background noise. And lastly, there is a tab which says handouts, and we have handouts there that you can access either now or towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so just some quick reminders that for the month of June, the trainings are for in-service hours only. You can also refer to the ELC website though, if you have any questions or if you're interested in possible stipend opportunities. The training certificate will be emailed to you within the next 24 hours. Usually it's before the end of the day. And just a quick reminder that if you are to be marked attended, you have to either log into a computer or you have to download the GoToWebinar app. So as a rule of thumb, if you do not see the screen, then we cannot see you and mark you as attended. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about ourselves, we want to know more about you. So we have a poll that you can answer now. And the question is, what is your position at your center? So do you have the role of a teacher? Are you maybe an assistant teacher? Are you a director? Or are you some other type of administration at your school? So possibly an owner or something else. And as you see, the poll is in front of you. We'll give you all a few moments to answer that, and then we'll get those results together.
Okay, Deborah, I'm going to give it just one more minute. I'm going to close the poll so we can see our responses from our first poll today. So I'm going to close and share it.
Okay, so we have the majority of you on today's call. There are 59% of you who identify as a teacher in the classroom. 17% say that you are an assistant teacher. We do have 16% of our attendees as a director and 8% as other type of administration. So it's great to see that we do have a variety of people on the call today. So as you're going through our presentation today, These are the main things that we want for you to take away. So our learning objectives are: educators will be able to identify the key components of early literacy development and how to apply them in a developmentally appropriate way. So you'll see strategies that we implement, and with that, you'll be able to use them in your classroom. Also, educators will be able to identify the continuums of learning stages for literacy and writing skills and why they're important. Afterwards, we'll see how you can identify and define some of those developmental stages of writing. So we'll go into those. And lastly, what we want you to be able to do is enhance emergent literacy activities. So again, you'll see some of the strategies and suggestions that we offer and see how you might be able to implement that in your own classroom. Okay, so the next slide we have is our standards for emergent literacy. And it's important that everything that we do with our students, that they're also implemented in supporting the early Florida learning standards. So you'll go in, you can Google this. It'll bring up to the actual website for OEL VPK standards. And then you'll click on one of the 8 domains. So for this presentation, we're working on language and literacy. You also want to be sure that you are clicking on the age group that you're working on. Keep in mind that the standards that you're going to see, can be completed throughout the whole year. So if you see in that slide there, we have those 8 components. Once you're able to click on that, you will see that one of the components that we're looking at here, the emergent reading. And then you click on that and it'll take you into it deeper, and you'll see that you'll look at the standards, and then you'll also be able to view the different benchmarks. What you might have noticed too, as you're looking at the benchmarks, is the word VROOM. So it's a tool that you can use that will give you suggestions on what teachers can do, what children can do, what teachers can do, and as families, how they can also help accomplish these goals for your students. So the first question we want to pose to the audience is, how many times a week do you read aloud to your students? So you can take this opportunity now and to write that into the question box. How many times a week do you read aloud to your students? Now, although there is no right or wrong answer to this, we would want teachers to at least read aloud daily. So, some of the responses that we're seeing is every day, 2 or 3 times, okay, almost every day, 10 times a week. We have a lot of responses that say every day, 10 times a week, 5 times, 3, 5, 10 to 15 times a week, daily, 6, 8, every day, daily. So we're getting a lot of responses that either say every day or 2 to 3 times a day. And thank you for sharing that. And yes, definitely we want to have at the minimum daily readings, but when we can, we want to implement that 2 to 3 times as much as possible. So we have this statement here that says, the single most important activity for building the knowledge required for eventful success is reading aloud to children. So yes, the more you read aloud, the better that is for the children. And what we have here is a visual to give you just more of a visual presentation of how important reading is to our young children. So if we can instill and keep their interest in books consistent, then they're a lot more likely to be introduced to new vocabulary. And statistically, if you see as well on this sheet before you, they're more likely to perform in those areas of standardized testing. What the visual doesn't take into account is that comprehension and social skills are actually often strengthened when a child is involved in read alouds and has a great interest in literacy. So you might be asking yourself, what is emergent literacy? Before we identify and define emergent literacy, it's important to note that one factor that influences children's literacy success is when the classroom or the school environment is filled with a culture that focuses around literacy and the resources that the staff needs in order to be successful. So basically what it means is that if your classroom makes reading an important experience, then children are a lot more likely to see the importance and the value of reading. So emergent literacy and writing skills. What's the definition? Emergent literacy skills are the basic building blocks for learning to read and to write. Emergent literacy evolves around the skills, the knowledge, and the attitudes that are developmental foundations to conventional forms of reading and writing. So some examples are that oral language. So how is that child able to speak about the reading and recall those events? And that'll usually help strengthen with their vocabulary skills too, the more that child is able to hear and pick up on new words. Then the phonological awareness. So children are able to also hear those sounds that make up those different words. And lastly, comprehension. So it's not enough for the child to just hear these stories. We want to make sure that they're understanding what's going on. How can they recall these events and make those own comprehension skills as well? Okay, so in the next slide, I think we might, yep, there we go. So as we have the statement that says, literacy is a journey, not a race. As VPK instructors, it's not expected for you to build a class of master readers. However, what you're more expected is just to build on the foundation. You're laying the foundation skills for your children to be readers and to process. So we really want to make sure that we're not rushing this process and that we're understanding that each child is coming in with different sets of skills, and every child starts at a different place when they enter the VPK classroom. Early childhood professionals need to know how to support young children's language and early literacy development. So this statement was said from Dr. Teresa Bollé, and she stresses the best practice in early literacy and how that best practice usually involves things that are planned but also spontaneous. So these are planned out events, but they're also incorporating those ideas of the student. So emergent literacy experiences from a framework upon which children will gauge in their future reading. If early experiences with books and reading are fun, exciting, and enjoyable, then that child is likely to keep that same emotion. Okay, so right now what we're actually going to do is we're going to show you a video, and we're just going to go more in depth with the concepts of emergent literacy. about that, everyone. So in that last video that we just saw, we were able to really just show you different ways in which print can be intentional in the classroom. And then before you, we have this image. And the question that we want to pose to all of you that are on the presentation today is, when you're looking at this picture, what do you see that is enriching in the literacy of this classroom? So what literacy elements do you see? Okay, so some of the comments that are coming in now, we see books. That's right, we have the bookshelf right in the center. Yeah, we're seeing more comments about books. Signage, the ABC wall, labels on the wall, posters. Someone said that the chair is labeled. Perfect. The carpet, yep, even on the carpet, we have the different letters of the alphabet. There is a word wall. Perfect. Then the alphabet poster. Seems like there's puzzles on the table, a number wall or the calendar. The alphabet is everywhere. Someone also pointed out that in the corner of the picture, you can see kind of like a felt board, and that also has letters there. Okay, calendar, so with the month and the year. Perfect. I think that you have everything labeled there. So thank you for participating. So, and before, okay, yes, someone also said shapes and the mats. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually hand over the presentation back to Stephanie, and she's going to go over the components of literacy. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Debra. And thank you to everyone who just put in all those great observations of that classroom. Like you said, Debra, I think everyone pretty much hit it all. They even found puppets and magnet letters, large print. So we have a great group of literacy conscious teachers with us today. So as we heard in the video and through the research, there are literacy skills or components that children should develop before they are taught to read. You'll be able to see them on your screen in just one moment. We're looking to develop these skills in the VPK classroom here, the precursors of reading, not reading itself. So now we'll take a look at each individual component that helps build the foundation for reading. And we will also see what it looks like in the VPK classroom. We will start with literacy as a sense of enjoyment as our first component. It is important for us as early childhood educators to have the mindset that all children are readers and love books. But just as this quote states, they may not have found the right book yet or just been shown the love of reading. The love of reading must be modeled to our children to create excitement and interest around the subject of reading. This modeling comes from all the adults in the child's life, but especially their teacher, which is a pretty awesome responsibility. So we want all students to look like this child on the next slide. When it's time to read, ready, engaged, and full of wonder and excitement. So we must create a literacy-rich environment in our classroom that's playful and fun. So I'm going to ask my audience, how do you promote the love of reading in your own classroom? What do you use to make literacy fun? And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to put in what you do in your classrooms in the question box here. I see someone says that they utilize puppets. Puppets are very fun. We choose our favorite book, have the children pick their favorite book. Great. So important for students to have choice, using different tonations of voice and using your facial expressions, having props, character making activities, using props and dress up. That's awesome. Acting out stories, asking kids to read the books to other children. What a great concept. changing books, modeling reading for yourself, and sometimes even using toys. These are all great activities that you have built into your classroom to promote this love of reading and this excitement of literacy and enjoyment. So thank you so much for sharing your own experiences and ideas to make literacy a sense of enjoyment. Now we're going to take a look inside of our VPK classroom. So in the VPK classroom, children are enjoying experiences with new words and meaningful context by acting out stories. They also spend time in the library center, engage with books that capture their personal interest. The library is a place where they choose to spend time. And finger plays are added into the day, and the children have fun with rhymes and songs, which we heard in the video at the beginning of the presentation. Songs and rhymes are very powerful learning tools, and you'll notice that we'll continue to mention them until the end of this presentation. And remember to show your own love for reading and share your favorite stories to your students and explain why these stories are special to you. In turn, the children will be able to better identify why they enjoy certain books themselves. All right, and our next component is vocabulary and oral language. Oral language is the foundation of literacy, and children need to learn new words and learn about the structure of language through talking with peers and adults, enjoying songs and rhymes and finger plays, hearing new words and listening to print be read aloud, and talking about new words. When do we see vocabulary and oral language developing in the classroom? When we see teachers engage in dialogic reading, which is a strategy where the adult and child switch roles. So the child learns to become the storyteller with the assistance of the adult, who serves as an active listener and a questioner during the shared reading of a book. And then also in our VPK classroom, there is intentional language. Teachers use specific language when addressing students. We hear intentional one-on-one conversations. And in between the teachers and conversations between the children as well. And then we may also see teachers who map or narrate or provide commentary for the action in the classroom to promote language and understanding. For example, if the teacher says, "I'm taking off the green marker cap," while the movement is actually happening, this makes that language concrete and less abstract. And then we also see teachers define and use new and unusual words in conversation and while reading aloud. And intentionally reading a book multiple times throughout the week, which we know in our audience is definitely happening. But research tells us that multiple readings of the same book using rich explanations of vocabulary words showed significant gains in preschooler vocabulary. For example, when the book was read one time during the week, 10% of the new words were retained by the children. However, when the book was read the same book was read 3 to 5 times a week, 80 to 90% of the new words were retained by the children. What an enormous gain. And remember, it's always good practice to look at your books and book before the week begins to determine what new vocabulary words that will be introduced and predetermine those definitions. And it's helpful to always have a good visual, prop, photo, image while introducing new words to the children, especially if the actual item is not available. All right, now we're going on to talk about phonological awareness. Explaining phonological awareness is frequently requested by teachers out in the field when I'm in different VPK classrooms. So we're going to spend a little extra time focusing on this component. And we're first going to start off with the definition of phonological awareness. We have a short video clip here that will illustrate what is phonological awareness. All right, we're gonna continue on with our next screen after that great definition of phonological awareness is really about these listening skills and breaking language into smaller and smaller pieces or parts. So, phonological awareness develops along a continuum from simple skills such as listening to very complex skills. So, where do you want to start teaching? Here's a great visual to illustrate where you can start your PA instruction. Remember that literacy is a gradual process. So it will take time to build each block, but we want to be cognizant or intentional of where the children are on the continuum and what their next steps will be. So why is planning with this continuum important? It's teaching our children to the level of their ability right where they are. It's preventing a shaky foundation and ensuring that the foundational skills the children need to be able to decode and understand the written word are developed so then they can in turn become readers. Now, I just want to note here that the Florida Early Learning Standards expect students to develop, the 4-year-old students, VPK students, to develop skills up to and including onset and rhyme. So you see phonemic awareness goes one step above, but the standards really looking for our children to have a good, strong foundation on onset and rhyme. But new research is finding that phonemic awareness is one of the most important pieces of readings, and these building blocks will get us there. That's how important each one of these blocks are to get us to where we need to be for our children. So phonological awareness is happening in the classroom through listening to read alouds, playing listening games like Simon Says, as well as sound matching games such as Mary, Moon, and Planet. Which word sounds different? And the teachers are also singing songs and reciting poems to get the children rhyming in a fun way. Remember, I said music is a very important aspect of developing literacy, and it will come up in many components that we talk about. So saying silly poems and finger plays, it's much more fun than listing all the words that rhyme with cat. That approach has less buy-in for the children. And in the VPK classroom, we see syllables are illustrated by clapping, stomping, jumping, and jumping on the beats heard in the different words. And then remember music. Music is the key in developing phonological skills. There are good songs teachers can use to focus on phonological and phonemic awareness skills. And we also got to hear one of those songs in the video, our first video, but we're also going to play a very short clip of another great phonological awareness song. Might bring you back a little bit. All right, so that was just an example of a great phonological awareness song that you can use with your children. I'm showing my age. I'm a huge Raffi fan, so that's why I chose the Raffi version of this. And notice how that song really manipulated very small sounds in the lyrics to change the entire sound of the word. And that's what the children are doing when they're singing along to that song and many other songs. So now we're going to move on to our next component. From phonological awareness, now we're going to be talking about knowledge of print. So knowledge of print or print awareness is teaching the children the understanding of how books work, how print is organized, and how it is used to convey meaning and carries a message. That print is organized in a specific way in English from left to right and top to bottom, and the words are separated by spaces. In addition to using books to demonstrate directionality, we can use interactive charts for the children to read. Environmental print is also used to help the children understand that print carries a message by using symbols from the children's environments that are actually meaningful to them. All right, now we'll discuss letters and words, or alphabetic awareness. Children must understand that a letter is a symbol that represents one or more sounds. A more complex level of understanding requires knowing that these symbols can be grouped together to form words and that words have meanings. In the VPK classroom, many hands-on opportunities are provided versus paper pencil activities, since we all know that children learn best through play with intentional teaching opportunities built in. It's not enough just to have children memorize the letters. There has to be an understood meaning associated with the letters. We want the letters to be handled and manipulated and really engaged with in an active participatory way. So as teachers, where do you start teaching letters? I want you to think of a word that typically would be the most important word for a child. What do you think it is? Well, research has not determined any best order for teaching alphabet letters, nor has it found any advantage to exposing preschoolers to just one or two letters at a time. The only fairly definitive finding is an own name advantage, which means that the child usually learns the first letter in his or her name, then the last letter, then the letter of their last name, and those of family members before learning other letters. So names should be in as many places as possible in your classroom. And as a side note, when introducing new letters, make sure you're starting with highly contrasting letters and words. A and S looks very different compared to B and D, so you really want to make sure that the letters look much more different from each other. And remember to expose and point out different types of font, because not all A's will look like the same printed and written. So it's really important for children to understand the basic shape and see it in different forms. Now it's time for us to move on to comprehension. Comprehension is the process of making meaning. It is the goal of reading instruction. It is the connection of what you read and hear with your experiences. So background knowledge helps the reader understand the meaning of the language. Even though preschoolers are not reading conventionally, they try to comprehend stories being read and told. They comprehend oral directions and information and conversations and in different subject areas such as science and math, and etc. So in the classroom, there's a focus on different aspects of the story, of sequencing, such as focusing on the beginning, the middle, and the end. Teachers are also asking different text comprehension questions to check for understanding. I love this example coming up right here, making connections. Oops, I'm thinking about something different. Yay, I understand the story better. The teacher wrote down quickly what the children said and was able to divide it to see who's comprehending the question correctly and who still needs a little bit more time to work on that area. So it's a really great, quick way to find out where your students are in the comprehension. And then lastly, we can also focus on reenacting stories and sequencing to also support comprehension skills in the VPK classroom. Books and other texts is our last component piece of emergent literacy that we will discuss before we move on to emergent writing. To increase children's understandings of books and other texts, In the VPK classrooms, teachers give children experience with a wide variety of genres of books, including predictable books, nonfiction, storybooks, wordless books, nursery rhymes, rhyming books, poetry, and music. And I know that books are not always readily available at every center in the same quantities, so don't forget to be creative when looking for your own library. You can go to yard sales, don't forget to visit the library, thrift stores. You can purchase great used books online, ask families for donations, etc. And make sure once you collect those books, you put your name on it so that library will travel with you anywhere that you go. In the VPK classroom, computer literacy is supported, and visuals such as schedules and hand washing signs are often referred to throughout the day. There are different types of texts in magazines, and teachers use functional environmental print to support students' understandings of letters and words and interact with them on a consistent basis. It's great to have the functional print labeled on the shelves and on the furniture, but it must be interacted with. So if Sarah saw the T, noticed the T on the word toilet, then you bring her, when she goes back to the table, you make that connection and we see the T on the table. So we're interacting with that print. And then we also have a great list of some other ideas for adding more text into your classroom. I know one that I didn't do, but I would do now. I never thought to bring in maps to the children, as well as advertisements. I never chose to use advertisements either, but I could really see how those could be used to enhance literacy. But there's a whole list here of great ideas that you can take with you to your classroom. So finally, a strategy that is going to support a number of the early literacy skills we just talked about is called turn and talk. Raise your hand on your monitor, on your dashboard, if you do turn and talk in your classroom. All right, I see hands going up. That's great. So turn and talk must be modeled and explicitly taught to the children. Sorry, we have a slight delay. There we go. Here's a great visual of turn and talk. We have the children sitting knees to knees and eyes to eyes. We have one friend who talks and one friend who listens, and then we switch after receiving a prompt from the teacher. So why do we think this strategy is important? Well, this strategy develops vocabulary and oral language as it gives each child a voice and a chance to practice being an active listener. It gets the whole class involved rather than only having time for a few voices. It helps practice comprehension and listening skills, which are those phonological awareness skills. Now that we've discussed all the components of emergent reading, we are now going to hear about emergent writing from Debra.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie. You really showed us a bunch of great examples to use for literacy. So we're going to go on now to emergent writing. So when you look at emergent writing, it is the understanding of a child's first attempt at the writing process. This is also when a child is able to make that correlation of their images and how that their images do have purpose and it has meaning. So right now, what we're going to do is we do have a quick poll for you. And we want to get, what is your level of understanding of emergent writing and its stages? So what do you know about emergent writing? Do you feel that you are at a 1? So I'm trying, but I just don't quite get it yet. Maybe you're at a 2. I almost have it, but I could use a bit more practice. Perhaps you're at a 3. I get it. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. Or do you believe that you are a 4? I could go right now and I could teach it with you two ladies. So this is your opportunity now. You can choose one of the 4 choices on the poll. And we're going to give you about a moment or so that we can collect those results and we'll share it with you all. Okay, so yeah, I do see that there are some people also writing their responses into the question box as well.
Okay, we're going to give this poll 30 more seconds. So if you haven't voted, please vote in the box. If your poll box is maximized window, you won't be able to select. If you're having trouble, once again, you can put it into the question box and we can see your results that way as well. All right, so I'm going to close up the poll and share the results with everybody so we can see where we are on emergent writing. Here you go, Debra.
So yeah, we're pretty much all over, but an exciting thing is that only 1% says I don't quite get it yet. And we're hoping though that throughout the presentation that you'll have a little bit more understanding. We do have 23% that feels that they're about a yellow. So I have it, but I need more experience. So it's just going to take a little bit more practice to be able to really implement it. 30% of you say you're at green, which is I get it. And 46, wow, said that you are at blue. So I could teach it and I could apply it in new and creative ways. So we have a lot of experts out here, so that's great. And hopefully we'll be able to, balance ideas off of each other. Perfect. So remember that when we talked a bit earlier about the VPK standards, it's the goals that we should have approached before the end of the school year. So these are goals that you are working on throughout the year as well. As we look at the different benchmarks, we have to realize that it does not state that the child must have this mastered. Accuracy is not as important as the child understanding the relationship and how writing has purpose and it has meaning. If you look at this slide in front of you, we see that there are more stages of writing. So you see that there are some distinguished features within the drawing. It isn't just scribbles. And the child makes the attempt to write the word bat. The spelling is incorrect and the letter B is written backwards. However, it is still age appropriate, and that's important as we're monitoring and as we're looking at the work of our children. This child made the connection that the writing still illustrates a message. And here we have why is it important to know the continuum of emergent writing? So we have the 5 stages, which is pre-emergent, emergent, developing, fluent, and proficient. We need to know this information to provide a variety of activities that is age appropriate and can be modified to support the child's individual need. We can't just build upon being fluent if a child is only at the pre-emergent stage. So before you, we're going to actually implement this, and it's called Name That Stage. And we have 2 examples of 2 different writing samples. So pre-literate is the drawing stage. It uses drawing to stand in for writing. It believes that drawing is communication in itself, and you read the drawings as if you were writing on them. So that's drawing. And then for scribbling, it is scribbles that intend as writing. So scribbling that resembles writing, and usually you might see that the child is holding a pencil like an adult. So what we want you to do, and you can respond to this in the question box, tell us, do you think A, the picture on the left, do you believe that is an example of drawing, or do you believe that is an example of scribbling? And then go ahead and do the same thing for B. Do you think that B, the image on the right, is that an example of drawing, or is it an example of scribbling? And feel free to answer in the question box now. Okay, I'm getting a lot of responses. All right, so Stephanie, we can kind of just bring that up. Okay, so the correct response is that A, and I saw many of you wrote this, A is an example of scribbling, and B is an example of drawing. So with A, there's no clear letter formation yet. And with B, we saw that the child is using the drawing to stand in for writing. Okay, so we have another round of name that stage. We're pretty much going to do the same thing again. With these two stages, we have early emergent. So this is when you're going to see those letter-like forms. Sometimes the letters might not be in the correct order, or the shapes, they might look more like shapes than letters. They might be just unique creations. Then when you move on to emergent, this is when you're going to see that there are letter sequencing, probably letters from the child's name. They may be written in the same order or different orders, or sometimes it's even just a long string of letters in random order. So when you look at these two images before you, do you believe that A is an example of early emergent, or do you believe that it's an example of emergent? And do the same thing for B. Is B an example of early emergent, or is it emergent? And I see that already some of you have been writing in the question box. So the correct response is that A is indeed an example of early emergent, and B is an example of emergent. So letter formation is beginning to occur in A. However, when we move on to B, we see that the letters are a lot more consistent and it resembles actual writing. Okay. And we have one more round of name that stage. So with the two examples before you, want to know, are they transitional or fluency? With transitional, you might see that the words may overlay. There may be, the child might create their own spelling. There might not be that proper spacing with the letters. As the child matures and becomes a better writer, there might be more conventional spelling and, only a few letters that are invented. And then when we move on to B is considered, when we move on to fluency, it is considered conventional spelling. So this looks just like how an adult would write. And I saw that some of you have already put in your responses. And this one I think was a little bit more straightforward, and I probably gave you a bit of a hint. And so yes, A is an example of transitional. We see that the writing format, it's fairly, the letters are fairly clear, but there are still so many letters that are misplaced or omitted that it does make reading that example a little harder. And then with B, that is clearly an example of fluency. That looks much more like an adult's writing. So thank you for responding and answering in on that. Okay, so now we have a great visual to help teachers know when to implement certain writing methods and skills. And these skills should be able to build upon one another. And remember that this is something that should go on throughout the year. So when we are first having our students come to us in the month of August, we're really practicing on writing their names, right? That a child knows their name and they're practicing writing it on their own sheets and their own belongings. And then afterwards, we're able to expand on that and start labeling pictures and drawings. We can then practice writing lists to communicate. And this may in the classroom with the teacher. Then we might even move on to corresponding to others. So have the children practice writing a note to one another. Afterwards, we can work on materials like expressing opinions or their preference, where they're able to vote on things and stuff like that. And then the key concepts from informational text. So we have one more video for you right now, and it is, what does emergent writing instruction look like? And when you're watching it, just ask yourself, what do you notice? Okay, thank you. So as we're looking at the video, we notice that the children are using inventive spelling, and they're also using images or their drawings to express themselves. And we even saw that the teacher implemented those little line spacings to try to assist them in writing. Okay. So the gradual release of responsibility is known as I do, we do, you do. It's a teaching strategy that includes demonstration, prompt, and practice. So at the beginning of a lesson or when new material is being introduced, you can use this. So with the first step, it's model. I do, as a teacher, I'm going to do this, and you're going to watch. So just hold on one moment. Then you move on to 2, which is I do, and you help me. I'm going to practice this, but you can assist me. When the child has that step down, then you move on to 3, which is you do and I help. As a teacher now, I'm going to tell the child, okay, it's your turn. You do, and I'm going to help you, just like she's doing in front of you, where there's that hand over hand assistance. And then finally, the child will move on to you do and I watch. Okay? And now we just have a few fact or myths for you. So memorization is reading. Do we believe that's a fact or a myth? And yeah, it is a myth, because with memorization, it's not reading. Memorization is just remembering. And then phonemic awareness just happens as a child learns to read. Is that a fact or myth? And it is a myth. Phonemic awareness takes practice. It's not something that a child just knows. The last one, worksheets are not the most impactful way to teach literacy skills. That is a fact. We saw so many different techniques used today. So there are so many things that you can use besides worksheets. Okay, and I'm going to turn the presentation back to Stephanie.
Thank you, Debra, for going over that with us and introducing us to emergent writing. For our final piece of our presentation, we have a collection of ideas that will support a variety of literacy components in your own classroom. So we all know that young children love to tell us stories, especially about themselves and what is going on in their lives. And journaling this information is the best place to start with their writing by using oral expression and taking it to the paper. So we're starting off with class journaling. On your screen here, you'll see a strong example of emergent writing via journaling. Notice the letter-like shapes, the illustrations, and the labeling by the teacher. This is what an authentic journal page looks like. But what can you use as a journal? There are many different items you can use as a journal, from printed out journal pages and clipboards to composition notebooks to just construction paper and plain paper. Notice how on all these examples, we don't see any pre-written words to be traced or drawn, just the child's own responses to the simple prompts from the teacher and the child's own writing and in their own stage. In addition to journals, you can make class books. And I know my 4-year-old and 5-year-old classes always used to love class books. It was one of their favorite activities and one of their favorite books to read. So class books are books that you make together with the class. They are typically repetitive, and they're a great addition to your library because it develops that understanding of the parts of the different book, how books work. And it also empowers the children to feel like readers because they're repetitive. And when the books are placed on the library shelf, they become mostly the class favorite books. So it's here, and you can see in this example, chicka chicka boom boom, look who's in our room. And then you can see I see, and then so you can do a play on chicka chicka boom boom. You can make an alphabet book, You can, if you're working on names, you can do, here are Jasmine's hands, and continue on with all the children's hands in their names. I like how in this example here, they use environmental print with his Lucky Charms binder and talking about the different foods that the children like to eat. And then also you can do a little play on brown bear, such as, I see David looking at me. David, David, who do you see? So the children are involved in the bookmaking process, and makes them really feel involved and connected to these books. So a great idea I found out in the, I noticed out in the field was to create a class alphabet book. And every week with the different letters that you are studying and introducing, having children bring in pictures of those, of items beginning with those sounds, those letter sounds as homework. And then they bring it in the next day to help build that letter book. And it's a great tool that you can continue to revisit time and time again. So our next strategy is I Spy. Simple enough, but guessing games such as I Spy can be used to work on most phonological skills. For example, do you want to practice noticing what sounds begin with? Try, I spy something blue that starts with B. Do you want to work on rhymes? You can try, I'm wearing something warm that rhymes with cat. So you can also create these interesting I Spy bottles to support this activity in a more hands-on way. Our next strategy for the classroom is interactive or joint writing. It's an instructional strategy that to use with the children that develops the children's understanding of how print works. So you're actually sharing the pen with your students. As you share the pen, you pause and you think aloud and ask your students questions. You ask them questions like, what letter makes that sound? And how do we spell the word cat? As you ask these questions, the students will tell you what they think, and then you will offer them the pen for them to write it down. You can see here on this example, there's a mixture of adult and children's writing on our screen. Now we have storytelling baskets. A different approach is a different way of approaching literacy skills, such as vocabulary, background knowledge, comprehension, demonstrating active listening, is with objects in a storytelling basket. With these hands-on pieces, children can retell familiar stories. You can see it looks like there's Little Red Riding Hood there, and it looks like Old MacDonald and a farm, and the Three Little Pigs. Or you can put in miscellaneous items that are unrelated to any story the children know and have them come up with their own new stories using prompts from the teachers. The next one coming up is one of my favorites. It's literacy and sensory exploration. This chart is a unique way of approaching literacy with sensory learning. Within the exploration of popcorn, you can see the children learn vocabulary, salty, warm, buttery, sweet, delicious, bumpy, crunchy. They use their background knowledge to put these words and apply them to the popcorn. They demonstrated comprehension by being able to categorize their observations, and they were able to actively watch the teacher demonstrating the writing process as the spoken word is represented then by text. So you can see that even though it was a sensory exploration, tying it in with literacy can really help promote strong learning. All right, and similar to joint writing is shared writing. And shared writing is a slightly different strategy for teachers and students to still work together to write a message. But shared writing is an opportunity for you to show the children different reasons for writing and how to record the messages on paper. So during shared writing, you write on the chart or another surface which is large enough for all the children to see, of course, and model the writing process by thinking aloud while writing. So during shared writing, the children can learn that we can write what we say and that others can read what we write, that print is organized from left to right and top to bottom, has spaces between the words, and they can also learn how letters are formed. And there's different types of shared writing. You can see this KWL chart, what we want to know, what we wonder about, and what we want to learn. And then you can also see we wrote a letter to the little old lady who I believe swallowed a fly. And it's a clever letter from Miss Colette's class telling her that if she wants to eat a cow, maybe she should choose a hamburger instead. But it really shows you how children can put their thoughts into different forms of writing. All right, now we're going to talk about meaningful literacy experiences. Worksheets support fine motor skills, but don't teach the function, the purpose, or promote the understanding of writing as a process. So there's little meaning behind that paper. So look at the example on the screen as a way to incorporate literacy skills in a meaning and authentic experience that is important to the child. See how it allows for different stages of writing to be nurtured. And if it's meaningful, any activity will provide the foundational understanding of how print carries and represents a message authentically, rather than going through the motions of rote practice and instruction. If the activities you provide the children are meaningful to them and connect to their lives, you will see more buy-in from your students and more engagement with the reading and writing process. And I know we have an avid group of literacy passionate teachers on our webinar today. So I'm sure that you know that writing centers are very important to have in your classroom as well. They demonstrate to the children that writing is important and encouraged. And we want to make sure that we're putting in and providing materials that are fun and interesting to the children. So your writing center doesn't have to be the biggest center, but it should definitely be thought out carefully. Some ideas you can add to your center is alphabet stamps, stickers, envelopes, different types of writing utensils, an alphabet chart, written words that are important for the children to try to write, and different types of papers and writing surfaces. So we have a second example right here that shows you don't need a lot of space, you just need a lot of organization, and you can create your own writing center. So we saw a word wall at the very beginning in the environmental photo that we showed you. And word walls are great places to add new thematic vocabulary and names. If you haven't used one, a word wall is a collection of words which are displayed in a large visible letters on a wall or a bulletin board or another surface in the classroom. The word wall is designed to be an interactive tool for the students and contains an array of words that can be used during writing, reading, and group discussions. Now, I know they can take up a lot of space, so I have some compact examples for you here. There's one, then the other. Now, the key with our word wall and a print-rich environment is that we want to make sure the children are interacting with it. For example, if a child drew a picture of a dog and they want to know what letter dog starts with, you would bring them over to this word wall, look for the word dog, which would typically have a picture, and then connect it to the letter D. Here we see some worksheets that promote creative play and understanding that print carries a message. And if you look over to the right of your screen, you can see that there are many creative ways you can embed literacy into your centers. Dramatic play is just one example. Science lessons can incorporate science journals. The block area can include building blocks and blueprints and paper and pencils for them to design their own buildings and creations. So note that books and writing materials should be available in every center of the classroom, and the books should be connected to what that center is about, and the writing materials should be appropriate for the center that they are in. So our next strategy is talking about letters and words. You can provide effective letter and word experiences with simple magnet letters. Magnet letter activities are also very easy to modify according to the child's skill level. You can see in the one image here, on this image on your screen, there are 3 different levels of letter activities happening. We can see a child who's just working on, do they look similar or do they look different? We have a child who is just working on color recognition, handling and manipulating with the letters, but maybe not ready to recognize them yet. And then we also have a child who understands that letters make up a word and go in a certain order and is working to recreate these words using his magnetic letters. And also, remember the power of math activities in literacy by using puzzles, creating graphs and other charts, and discussing and recognizing and building complex shapes. Because after all, letters and numbers are just new shapes for your children to learn. And your children should have multiple opportunities to make letters out of different materials, the same way they'd make shapes out of different materials during a math lesson. So this was our final strategy we have for you today. I'll turn over the rest of the presentation to Debra, who will review some important information regarding your certificate and a final survey for today. So thank you once again for all your attention, and I hope that we were able to bring some new knowledge to your vast toolbox that you already came with today.
Okay, thank you again, Stephanie. So just really quickly, we're going to go over this, and it's what we had at the beginning of our presentation. Again, just a reminder that for the month of June, all trainings are in service hours only. By the end of the presentation, or I'm sorry, actually by the end of the day, you will have received your certificate, and that will be your proof that you have attended. When the webinar ends today, you'll also receive a survey, and we really just want you to fill that information out and just give your honest opinion about the presentation today. Okay, if you went over this presentation today and you felt like you still had a few questions for us, right now we're going to provide you with our contact information in the slide before you. You can feel free to either reach out to myself or to Stephanie. Again, you will not receive your certificate from us, though. You will receive it before the end of the day. And we just wanted to briefly let you in on some of the references and the resources that we use for today's presentation. And just wanted to thank you again for joining us. We're going to also be on for a few more minutes in case you did want to download the handouts for today's presentation and use that at another time. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your Thursday afternoon with us.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Friday Eve and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you for donating your time to us for this training. I hope it was a valuable use of your time. And we really appreciate all the amounts of engagement you gave us throughout the presentation as well. So have a wonderful afternoon, and don't forget to download those handouts. All right, I have someone who wants to see our resources, so I'm just gonna move our slide presentation back a little bit so you can see them right there. I'll give you a minute. You can take a picture with your cell phone if you like. There's some really handy websites there and webinars. So I hope that helps you. All right, in about 1 minute, we will be ending the webinar. So your survey will appear once the webinar has ended. So once again, please fill it out. All your feedback will be very helpful for us in determining and creating more webinars for you all to enjoy.